Well, hello. It's Ary Rosenbaum with another fun episode of that 4K podcast. Well, I don't know how fun it could be, especially with everybody here holed up and isolated and social distancing and all that from the coronavirus pandemic. But this week's topic, obviously, we're living in very, very unique times. So we're going to talk about not very unique subjects. We're going to talk about more concerns that I have for plan providers in dealing with this coronavirus pandemic. We did have an episode a couple weeks ago about this, but there have been some changes, and not some changes, but things that I've seen in the business that pause for concern because it reminds me of problems in the past that I've dealt with during other hard economic times, as well as the industry's response to what's going on, especially with the CARES Act. So, of course, as everybody knows, before we get into the thick of things, um, it's time for me to talk about our events. Next week will be that 401k virtual conference available for free to plan providers on Zoom. A lot of great content. I'll be talking about coronavirus concerns, obviously, again. There'll be topics from Paycor, dealing with HR issues. We have creative plan design. We'll talk about plan design issues. We will have our friends from FPS Trust talk about automatic rollovers, and we'll have pension assurance talking about audit issues, and Granite Group will talk about PEP and MEP concerns. So it's going to be a fun day, and we're all staying at home. So it's a unique event, great content, similar, of course, to that 4K conference, except there won't be any lunch, there won't be any stadium tour, and there will be no athlete appearance. Hopefully we can begin again with that 4K conference. Obviously, Houston and St. Louis are on pause. We will get new dates for them when available, obviously, really depending on when the Major League Baseball season will start. Hopefully we can have the event in Minneapolis on June the 5th. The closer we get, the answer is going to be no. That's also going to probably have to be rescheduled. But one can always hope. As Red learned in Shawshank Redemption from Andy Dufresne, hope is a good thing, a very, very good thing. So hopefully we can have the event in Minnesota. If we don't, we don't. We'll have to reschedule it for sometime in August or September. We'll see what happens. Everything's in flux. Obviously, when you look at how many people are sick and how many people have died, obviously there are more important issues out there. So go to that 401ksite.com for further information on all the events. Now let's go back to the topic at hand. And of course, these are very, very challenging times. If you're a plan provider, if you have an office, most of your employees are working from home. When I started this business in 1998, VPN wasn't really a thing. You couldn't work from home. I always had the fear as an ERISA attorney working for a third-party administration firm that, if I took a week or 2 weeks vacation, somehow there'd be a pile of folders on my chair and 1,000 emails that I'd have to respond to because there was no remote access. Thankfully, that we have now the technology that we can fairly conduct our business from the confines of our own home. It's great that in 2020 that this happened rather than 2000 or 1998 or even earlier than that, when technology really wasn't there for us to work from home and run a third-party administration firm or financial advisory firm or risk attorney, plan auditor or whatnot. As I always say, you need to keep these things in perspective. I mean, this pandemic, I wasn't around for World War II. I don't know what life was like with ration coupons in the United States. My grandparents had survived the Holocaust, so I don't have any idea what it was like to be in the concentration camps. They had talked about it when they were around, and I didn't understand it. It's not something that you can understand and comprehend. So I always, keep things in perspective. It keeps me going. I look at the suffering of my grandparents and I was thinking about my grandmother who was 20 years old, and she gets off the train in Auschwitz with her mother, and she goes one way, and her mother, who's 47 years old, goes the other way. Never sees her mother again. Her mother, at age 47, not like today's 47, which kind of odd. She was 47. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm 47, and obviously in those days she had a hard life, working very hard, and she was kind of old for her age, I guess, and she was killed. And not trying to bring anybody down her, but one of the things when my house was half destroyed by Hurricane Sandy, the thing that kept me going was realizing, my suffering doesn't compare to what my grandparents had suffered, and what we're going through, being in our houses, or is far worse to hear about people who died. I know two people. One lost their father. One lost their father-in-law. These are very, very tough times. But when we look at the totality, we have to keep things in perspective. Yeah, you know what? I have my health. I have a house. I have streaming. We have internet. We don't live in the dark ages anymore. I think if I was still growing up in 1980s Brooklyn, when I didn't have cable TV, I think the suffering would be a lot more. But I think overall we have to keep things in perspective and understand that there's a lot greater suffering out there that's not our own. Other people are suffering as well, far worse than we are. And then in history, realize that other situations in the past were far worse than what we're experiencing now. So, like I said, the sky, isn't falling. I mean, there are discussions. People are talking about people are terminating 401k plans. Plan sponsors are going to do that, and I've been in this business for 22 years now, and that means that this is going to be my third bear market, the way it's going. And from perspective, realizing what happened in the past, 2000, 2001, the dot bomb era, as I call it, the high valuations for these internet stocks, they went kablooey. Even companies like AOL Time Warner. I still regret to this day that I didn't have the opportunity to buy Amazon at $16 a share and keep it. But that was what really happened, and this is far different. When the dot bomb era happened, the stock market crashed. People were out of work, but not to the amount of people that are out of work today. And of course, 2001, September 11th, we had close to 3,000 people killed in New York, a couple hundred people in Washington, D.C. Then, of course, United 11, crashing in Pennsylvania. This wasn't something that affected the entire country in terms of unemployment, in terms of despair and businesses folding. This is something probably we haven't seen since the Great Depression. So it's different than what we saw in 2001, 2002. The same thing in 2008, 2009 with the credit crisis. The market, the housing market crashed. Obviously, the bond market dealing with unsafe, predatory housing loans and the bonds behind it, and just all that stuff. The Big Short is a great movie, by the way. It was a struggle. Nobody wanted to start a 401k plan. It's very, very hard to sell a product that is so tied to the stock market when times are rough, and that's fact. But you'll see that people will talk about articles, and I saw one today. Mike Webb posted on Twitter on how people predicting that if plan sponsors don't get any relief dealing with notices, contributions, and whatnot, that 200,000 401k plans will terminate. Thanks to the successor plan rule, the only plans that are really going to terminate, and the successor plan rule is one of those things where, struggling plan sponsors just can't terminate a 401k plan and then start one up, a week or 2 weeks later or 6 months later. The successor plan rule says, you know what, you can't start one for another year. And that's a great, way to stop people from terminating plans. But when employers go out of business, obviously these plans are going to get terminated. Are 200,000 employers going to go out of business? I don't know. Chicken Little, the sky isn't falling. Uh, People will terminate their plans. That's a fact. They will go out of business. They will terminate their plans. That's not good for our industry, but that's the reality of the economy that we're in. When all these local businesses that aren't essential in my area have shut down, um, people are unemployed. Small mom and pop shops, they can't afford to be shut down 2 3 months. They can't afford to stay open afterwards. And I even have some restaurants. My son's favorite pizzeria. Well, I shouldn't be talking about it during Passover, but his favorite pizzeria um, was open, and then last week just closed down for the time being. Whether that's related to coronavirus, if somebody got sick over there, I don't know. But it's affecting even essential businesses where they're actually being forced to close down. So it's going to be a challenging time as a plan provider. And again, people are terminating plans left and right. That's going to be a strain. That's going to hurt business. I go back to 2001, 2002, remembering what it was like. And of course, the market went south in 2000. Really, where it started. And then, of course, 2001 added on to it. And it's kind of crazy. I remember right after September 11th, February 2002, I was working for a law firm associated with the TPA, CBiz Retirement Services Inc. And I will never forget that they had to let go of 7 employees. And of course, my favorite story about it was I pinpointed which 7 employees got fired, that were going to get fired. I said, I think they'll fire this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And of course, I thought logically we'd get rid of, the incompetent employees. And of course, when dealing with a business that is run by irrational people, not one of the people that I thought would get fired got fired. So Orville, who couldn't do a correct distribution, and who went from office clerk to computer expert to distribution expert, and he was bad at every job that he did. He still worked there, but the administrator for one of our largest plans, who I thought was not a bad administrator, he got fired. So it was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it was called, because it actually happened on St. Valentine's Day, and as a result of that, um, you know, uh, what happened was, people got terminated on St. Valentine's Day, and then what happened afterwards was the next day the bosses decided to buy pizza for everybody that survived, which didn't go over very well for the people that a good chunk of the people that stayed on. They thought that was disrespectful for the people that terminated, and quite a few people actually didn't eat the pizza. And of course, me, I ate that pizza because I felt like, what? Free food is free food. I don't care what it was. I mean, it was a really dumb idea. And I later went to Harvey, who was running the place and had hired me. And I said, whose dumb idea was that? Because it's just bad. It didn't look right. It's something out of Glengarry Glen Ross, where the Alec Baldwin character says, first prize is a new car, a Cadillac. Second prize, the set of steak knives. Third prize, you're fired. And I was like, you got canned, and if you didn't get canned, you get free pizza the next day. Whatever it was ridiculous, and I told Harvey it was ridiculous, and I later found out that it was Harvey's idea. He told me. But, me, I wasn't afraid to tell somebody that they had screwed up. So next, going back to the coronavirus distribution as part of the CARES Act, it's interesting what's going on because I see a lot of TPAs just not doing a great job in terms of rolling it out. It seems a lot of plan providers, especially larger ones, have a knee-jerk response and demanding that plan sponsors opt out. my opinion, I wouldn't have given anybody a choice. But it's an optional provision. But giving employers a choice in these matters kind of screws up because the plan provider, the TPA, would actually have to record as to who opts out. Because when you have an amendment due in 2022, you want to make sure the plan amendment that is needed for the coronavirus distribution corresponds to the employers that actually opted in for it. Again, my 2 cents. Plan sponsor should offer it. We don't know. It's bad for employees, in my opinion, giving them access to money that invading the retirement plan assets. It's great that there's free from the early distribution penalty, but again, people are invading personal assets. I'm sorry, they're invading retirement plan assets. It's not good that they are doing that. It's not good for the industry. Uh, but I would give the plan participants that option because, again, we don't know everybody's situation. These are troubling times. If they need the money, it's their money, and they should have access. But it's a bad thing for this business. It's a bad thing that, again, um, when the stock market went crazy and crashed in 2000, 2001, 2002, in 2008, 2009, yes, there were changes. There was an RMD waiver and all that kind of stuff, but there was no way for participants to access money as a result of a recession. But with this pandemic, now they have this opportunity to get a distribution regardless of the hardship rules. So, again, not good for participants, certainly not good for plan providers, especially those plan providers that get paid a percentage of plan assets. Um, Especially when the stock market went down, 25, 30%. And of course, the stock market has rallied. I don't know how long that's going to last. Probably until sometime in the third quarter when you're getting those second quarter results, and we realize how bad companies have missed their estimated goals and whatnot, and obviously the effect of unemployment. Something like a big Disney fan. Obviously, the parks being closed is going to be such a tremendous hit towards revenue, but it is what it is. Um, but it's a struggle. And one thing I've seen some of the larger plan providers are actually waiving the distribution charge for plan participants who want to access their money through the coronavirus distribution because of the coronavirus pandemic. Um, I'm sure the larger providers could afford that. If I had a TPA client that asked me whether they should allow that, I would say, you know what, you should never do anything for free. Uh, Preparing distribution packages for plan participants, whether it's a hardship or termination distribution, those require hours of work by your employees, and you should get paid for it. That's my 2 cents. Um, Plan participants taking out money, which is hurting most plan providers. Why should you be doing that work for free? That's just my 2 cents. Some of the larger providers who are in the mutual fund company business sell other products. They never really saw the third party administration work as a big revenue getter. They have other, they just see it as an ancillary service. In my opinion, the unbundled CPA would be foolish to not charge for these distributions. It's just, you do work, you should get paid for it. And I always say many years ago, let's just say a family member was dating somebody, and that family member wanted me to do their income taxes for free, the boyfriend or whatever, and I refused. And everybody thought I was crazy. How rude are you? You expect to get money? And I said, you know what? My work, is worth something. And I think if you're telling somebody it's not worth anything, that it's free, then they're going to anticipate that your work wasn't worth anything. And the times that I've done work for free as an artist attorney on my own have been absolutely, bad, bad ideas, bad mistakes. Somebody asked me to do a plan review one time for free, and then he'll give me other plan reviews. And let's just say that the free plan review was the only plan review I did for that advisor. So that's my 2 cents. Don't do anything for free. And of course, obviously, as we discussed before, a lot of companies are not going to want to start a 401k plan. It's going to be hard to start, have employers start 401k plans. But right now I'm working on a new MEP, um, and actually I'm working on a couple new MEPs. So the idea is that while everybody's concerned about the market and whatnot, there are some opportunities out there. Just don't be afraid and just say to yourself, oh, nobody wants to start a new 401k plan. There are people out there that are bold and adventurous and want to do right by their employees, and they're going to want to start a 401k plan. They're going to want to start a MEP. They're going to start a PEP. Um, you know, future favors the bold, or something like that. I didn't buy Amazon at $16 a share. Somebody else did, and somebody else is laughing about it. Fortune favors the bold. That's what I was trying to say. But with these difficult times with sales, I think that you really have to think differently. One of my favorite stories, dawned on me this week. You lose track of time, and this is around the same time. 10 years ago, I started my own law practice after leaving Meyer Swazi, and I remember when the market was bad in 2008, 2009, and I started with Meyer Swazi in early 2008, and I think it was later 2008, right during the campaign where the economy really went tanked. Um, and I remember the guy who was he was the law office manager, a law firm administrator. He really made himself out to be something more important than he really was. And I remember him sitting down with me and saying, you know what, in these struggling times, we need to focus on other areas of practice. And really, we should focus and really help you build your law, your practice, your ERISA practice. And my running joke is that I'm still waiting for Fred to help me out 12 years later because he absolutely did no help. And it might have been good to focus on that type of the business. And so, again, everything's a challenge in life. I mean, I used to always have a saying: if it wasn't a struggle, it wasn't any fun. It's important to sit back and see, while other plan providers may be struggling and having a hard time dealing with, terminating plans or plan participants getting a distribution of a good chunk of their account balance as a result of coronavirus. There still is opportunity to build your practice and to sell plans. And really, it's just trying to think differently. Again, 10 years in, I only got a name for myself because I built a name for myself. I was somebody different, somebody frank, and somebody really honest. And, of course, that hurts me sometimes in getting invited to some events or whatnot. But, it's the frankness and the openness and the honesty, still pays bills. Uh, so I just think that these are challenging times, but we have to realize, one of my favorite movies is Poseidon Adventure. There's got to be a morning after, and there will be a morning after, and we will get out of this sooner than later. Uh, when that's going to end, your guess is as good as mine. The sadness about this pandemic is your guess is as good as mine, and my guess is as good as the medical professionals who have no idea of what's going on with this pandemic. This is something unique and different, and it's not like the flu where we have an idea on how it progresses and whatnot. This is something that's quite novel and new. It's scary as the first time we heard about AIDS, because so much 35 years ago we had no idea what ways AIDS can people can contract AIDS and how it moves along and whatnot. And I remember all the crazy stories. Oh, mosquitoes might be able to give people AIDS because the mosquitoes bite one subject who might whatever. It is what it is. But like I said, this is something unique and troubling. But you have to have a optimistic attitude. And again, these are challenging times, and I just think that you got to play it smart. And my 2 cents, and you can take it and treat it as if it's really 1 cent. But I think that if you're a TPA, don't do distributions for free. You're ready. It's already challenging times. People are taking out money, and plan participants are not the decision makers for the employer. My 2 cents. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Again, I didn't buy Amazon. It was $16 a share. So it is what it is. So until next week, hopefully next week we won't have a coronavirus topic, but hopefully you join me for that virtual 401k conference. Find the link on that 401ksite.com, or check me on LinkedIn and Twitter, where we have the link for the Zoom conference and webinar, and it should be a lot of fun, really interesting. So I hope you can be part of it. So until next time, take care. Bye.